Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and it's day 2 of our essays on domesticity. It's E.V. Lucas's collection of essays from 1900, and they are a little book of household impressions. We did concerning toast yesterday, and today is concerning breakfast. And E.V. Lucas was a late Victorian Edwardian, lived from 1868 to 1938. He never slept, he never ate, he did nothing but read and write, and somehow squeezed 40 plus hours a day in every 24 hours. At least it seems like that, because if you look just at a brief list of his publications, you wonder how any human being could write as much as he did, plus have a life, have jobs, and just literally do other things. It's just amazing. And he did it, which is quite inspiring. He starts out for concerning breakfast. Houses where everyone is punctual for breakfast are not good to stay in. The virtues so flourish there. A little laxity in the morning is humanizing. For dinner, punctuality, by all means, punctuality severely to the minute. But for breakfast, let there be liberty to tarry on the way. To be late for breakfast is so natural an act that instinctively one feels it to be right. There is a kind of half-wakeful sleep following the precarious folding of the hands, which the comfortable resort when they are first called, and it is more precious than all the deep somnolence of the night. And he quotes two little poems here about waking up in the morning. I'll read the second one. Morning sleep avoideth broil, wasteth not the greedy toil, doth not suffer care or grief, give aching bones relief. Of all the crimes beneath the sun, say which his morning sleep was done. And then he says, yet breakfast in bed is not the joy some persons would have us think it. There are crumbs. And then he goes on to describe appetites for breakfast, where some just have coffee, some toast, and nothing else. Others have a whole meal of it, and by the sounds of it, many meals. And he quotes here from Sir John Hawkins' History of Music, and he quotes a 16th century manuscript belonging to the House of Northumberland. It's the Percy family, and here is breakfast for Lord and Lady during Lent. It's first a loaf of bread, and then a small loaf of white bread, so several loaves of bread, a quart of beer, a quart of wine, 2 pieces of salt fish, 6 baconed herring, 4 white herring, or a dish of sprats. And it just, it's just amazing. And it says even for the nursery, for the children, they get a quart of ale, a quart of beer. And then he talks about King Henry VIII and Robin Hood. Robin Hood's men had venison for breakfast. And then also to Isaac Walton, of Isaac Walton of the Complete Angler fame. And after about 9 o'clock in the morning, he talks about having breakfast after being up and starting to fish at 5 a.m. And he would have powdered beef and a radish or 2. While others will have they'll have a glass of ale as soon as they're dressed, and no more and nothing else till dinner. And others will light a pipe, for that is commonly my breakfast too, as the quote goes. And he does say that no pipe is so gracious as that which follows breakfast. And he talks about children's breakfast usually means bread and milk. Then he goes into porridge. He talks about Quaker porridge, which was popular at his time, around 1900 by the sounds of it, and it's still popular now. But he talks about the war of porridge, in a sense, where the war is between those who use salt and those who use sugar, and almost like never the twain shall mix. And he says he thinks it's interesting that the porridge is of Quaker origin, which are pacifists, which should have rubbed out any of this war and strife. Then he talks about the egg. The egg is a perfect breakfast, and he goes for a poem that's and it's the Holiness the Pope has said, and it's reaches English readers via Mr. Andrew Lang, another late Victorian writer who never slept and never ate. And the little poem goes, "Fresh be thine eggs, hard-boiled or nearly raw, or delftly poached, or simply served au plat. There's wit in poaching eggs, the proverb says, and you may do them in 100 ways." And then he talks about he likes Lucas likes starting the day having breakfast with watercress. It is sharp and awakening indeed to show to fullest advantage to scintillate as nature intended. And he says it's not like the taste. If it tastes of anything, it tastes of early morning in spring. It is eloquent of the charms of its native environment. Nothing else, lettuce, radishes, cucumber, landcress, or celery, speaks or sings to the eater, as watercress does, of cool streams and overhanging banks and lush herbage. The watercress has for neighbors the water lily, the marsh marigold, and the forget-me-not. The spirit of the rivulet abides in its heart. So it gets a little eloquent and purple in some ways over watercress. And he says, no matter of what the breakfast consists, marmalade must be a part of it, and it's the best thing. And everyone's homemade marmalade is notoriously the best. But where the commercially manufactured article is used, opinions differ. And he talks about His Majesty prefers the vicious variety, which is impossible to Oxford men bred on Cooper's tests of d'Urbervilles. It is remembered favoured Keywell's, or at any rate, it was this maker who assisted in the embellishment of Little Sorrow's grave. The universities are not loyal to marmalade. At Cambridge there is a saying that no man can pass his little go until he has consumed his own weight in it. While Oxford first called it squish, the attitude of women to marmalade has never been quite sound. True, they make it excellently, but afterwards their association with it is one lamentable retrogression. They spread it over pastry. They do not particularly desire it at breakfast, and worst, they decant it into glass dishes and fancy jars. Where there is no marmalade, shift may be made to honey or jam or treacle. Is not entirely out of favour. And he goes on here and says, most of us children saw our names writ in treacle. Breakfast is a meal at which one becomes a Parian. Everything being on the table or on the sideboard, one can sip, be like, where one will, hence perhaps the absence of conversation at breakfast. At dinner there are where formality is preserved, where one progresses artistically and with dignity towards replenished conversation is fostered. At breakfast, there is merely chatter, sporadic and trivial. scraps from letters, puns, dreams, and the description of strange noises heard in the night. Dreams told at breakfast should be accompanied with reservations, for few persons are strong enough to tell them faithfully. Yet, although breakfast does little for the conversationalist or the gourmet, it is often the merriest and freshest of the day's meals. The joy of it is new every morning. Breakfast is the beginning of another day. Lunch and dinner but are continuations. And to those glad natures which are reinvigorated and heartened by early sunrise, breakfast is the time for high spirits. And he goes on to talking about breakfast parties are indeed practically obsolete. And he has a footnote here referring to a remark by Macaulay to Mrs. Stowe that loses point, and this point is not restored by reading lunch for breakfast. For the old breakfast does not quite take the place of modern lunch. And, quote, you invite a man to dinner because you must invite him, because you are acquainted with his grandfather, or it is proper you should. But you invite a man to breakfast because you want to see him. You may be sure if you are invited to breakfast, there is something agreeable about you. And it says, one reason for the early hour, wit is for the day's decline. Another is discontent. Bed is not yet forgotten, nor the breakfast going forgiven, and wit requires a mind at ease. So, that is concerning breakfast. And the next one is concerning walks, which we'll do tomorrow. I thought I'd show, because I knew this one would be a little quicker than the others, I thought I'd show some of the other books that I have of E.V. Lucas that I've had in the past that I've collected. This one's a Phantom Journal. Paid the princely sum of £1 for it. And again, there's some of the listing of the books he's written. Just an interesting frontispiece. It's Phantom Journal and Other Essays and Diversions. Second edition, Methuen. 1920 was the second edition. The first edition was 1919. And it's got like a variety of stuff. A Perfect Guest, The Green Among the Grey, Punctuality, Thoughts at the Ferry, New Glimpses of Borrow, A Man of Ross, The Innocent's Progress, The Visionary Triumph, On Waiters and Manners, A Coward's Courage, and it goes on. An East Anglian Bookman, On Epitaphs, On Disguise, Golden Eagle, Distrust of Man, Broken English, Telephonics, just a number and of them, and it's a nice little Methuen green cloth hardcover. This one, Events and Embroideries, is red. This was, I think, another pound or 50p find, and it's got a little bookseller sticker in here, Matthews and Brooke, booksellers, Bradford. So that's where it originally was bought. You see it. Can you see it there? It's shiny, but let's do it both ways. See, maybe you can see it there or there. It's nice when you get these. They're in the corners usually, on the front or on the back, attached end paper, and you get to see where the book was actually sold originally. This is Events and Embroideries, Methuen and Company again, first published 1926. Just again a collection of wonderful essays, Namesakes and Hermits, Other People's Houses, Off with the New. This has, I think, Bats, which is a wonderful essay on bats. sporting memorials, 18 buttons, Andronicus and the element, the squirrel, boars, American notes, my volcanoes, Sicilian impressions, on the cards, and the first Christmas. This is part of a set. These are the essays. It's called Minerva, Minerva edition. I think there's about 11. There should be a few more. These are the fiction books. These are the essays sections. And this is Gentlest Art. It's just a reprint in a common binding. It may look quite nice on the video, but it's the nasty vinyl covering. I do like the medallion there, but it's got the gold on the top, on the foredge, on the top edge. Sort of marbled pages for the end papers, but not very well done. Yeah, it's just this nasty vinyl, which I just have a peculiar dislike to. But I did buy it offline, and it was cheap. I think for like 10 or 11 volumes, I didn't even pay like £4 or £5 for it with shipping, so I couldn't say no to it. So there's a number of the essays. There's one here that has the Domesticities essays, are a part of them, that he rewrote and expanded. This one here is Mr. Ingleside, and I'm not 100% sure if this is essays or essays as written by somebody else or fiction. I haven't actually looked at that one closely. This one's is over Bemerton's. Again, another collection of essays. Must be this one here. One Day and Another. No, it's not that one. Thought one of them does have a